Morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. This morning, the Poor People's Campaign held a press conference to kick off a bid to get tens of millions of poor and low income individuals to the polls. Mark Thompson had some fiery remarks at the press conference, which was held at the National Press Club in D.C. We will talk about that this morning. The average wealth gap between white families and Black and Latino families is now more than $1 million. We will discuss that this morning as well. And the family of Ralph Yarl, the young teenager you might remember who was shot and wounded after mistakenly going to the wrong house last year, has filed a civil suit against the shooter and also the community. The shooter, of course, is Andrew Lester, who had been arrested for shooting Ralph Yarl. We'll talk about that. And police officer hiring is up now since the death of George Floyd in 2020 at the hands of police. Why is that the case when we've heard so much about police reform? We will talk about the latest survey that shows the increase in hiring of police. And a couple of black facts for April 30th, including on this date in 1944, the United Negro College Fund was started. We'll talk about a few black facts this morning. But first, in Washington, D.C., yesterday, led by Bishop William J. Barber II, who is the president and senior lecturer of repairs of the breach and co chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. He joined Reverend Liz Thea Harris, who is the co chair of the Poor People's Campaign, in a press conference of many constituents, many partners to talk about what they plan to do going forward, including a moral march on Washington, D.C., a call to the polls and to vote, which is scheduled to begin on June the 29th on Pennsylvania Avenue, of course, near the White House. They are targeting 15 million poor and low wage, infrequent voters nationwide. It's going to be a 4 month outreach effort to get at least 15 million poor and low wage, infrequent voters to the poll. And they're not in any way, they made sure to say that it is a uh, effort to get them to the polls, but not tell them who to vote for. Just presenting facts is what that press conference uh, came came down to. And they released a study too during the press conference called Awaken, I'm sorry, the Sleeping Giant, Poor and Low Income Voters in the 2020 elections. They noted that approximately 85 million eligible voters in the United States are classified as poor and low wage, which constitutes at least 30% of the electorate. In battleground states, the percentage climbs to over 40%. Reverend Barber declared that this is movement time. He says, we are here to mobilize the power of over 33 million poor and low wage voters to demand attention to their concerns in the political arena. They said, our goal is to center the desires and political agenda of those who are often left out of the conversation. The coalition comprises representatives from over 30 state coordinating committees, religious organizations, labor unions, and advocacy groups. And what they want to do again is to seek. They want to mobilize what they say is a substantial voting bloc to demand that political candidates um, endorse a moral agenda and address the poverty and low wealth crisis, which they say have claimed about 200, which claims about 295,000 lives every single year. Barbara said that poor and low wage voters are saying in this season that if you want these votes, talk to poor and low wage folks. He said he listened to so many debates in the previous presidential election and in other elections, and he said debates totaling hours and hours and hours, and not once did they spend any time talking about the plight of poor and low wage voters, which is very discouraging, he said. Our own Make It Plain, Mark Thompson, also addressed the crowd at the press conference. He was among the many. And blackpressusa.com actually live streamed it along with C-SPAN. And Mark Thompson really tried to bring the point home this way. He says, wherever there is a lack of health care and voting rights or LGBT rights and immigrant rights, there is an abundance of poverty. He says, wherever there is a lack of jobs and labor unions and sensible gun laws and women's body autonomy, there is an abundance of poverty. He went on to say, wherever there is a lack of racial justice and legal rights, criminal justice reform, access to adequate legal representation, and alternative to incarceration and police reform, wherever those things are in lack, there is an abundance of poverty. And so they pledged to continue the work of the late civil rights champion, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He says, I contend, Mark Thompson says, I contend we do not need to ask permission to finish Dr. King's work. He did not retire. It is our duty to pick up his baton and move forward. And this is what Barbara's Poor People Campaign is commissioned to do. They are they have been, we should say, this is not a new thing. They have been pushing the plight, the needs for folks to pay attention to the poor and low wage in this country. And there's a lot of that. And when you consider that the wages are not getting better, but prices are going up, it presents a problem. Even when it comes to, we see that the mortgage rates over 7% again. We see that rents are sky high. And just to keep the lights on, it's costing what used to cost a mortgage to for some folks to keep the lights on. And so, what the coalition is doing and have been doing for decades is to try and continue to shine a light on really the more underprivileged individuals and families in this country, this very wealthy country. And speaking of wealth, um, here's something that's, while alarming, not really surprising. The average wealth gap between white families and Black and Hispanic families reached a new high in 2022. The latest statistics available. It topped $1 million in household wealth. This is new research performed by the Urban Institute, which of course is a nonpartisan think tank which focuses on economic and social policy research. And they found that the average wealth is exactly this. White families in 2022 reached a record high of over $1.3 million. And this is where it really hits you in the stomach, compared to about 227,000 for Hispanic families and 211,000 for Black families. It's the first time, this report is the first time that the Institute has recorded a seven-figure disparity in average wealth for both Black and Hispanic households. The median wealth for white families was 284,000 compared to 62,000 for Hispanics, and get this, 44,000 for Black families. And one of the things that the report authors highlighted was that inequities measured at the median will give you a better sense of the comparisons across typical families. But inequities measured at the mean will give you a better sense of the macro level disparities in wealth accumulation in this country generally and by race. They also noted that both numbers are important when you considering the fact that they are the result of structural racism. And as one of the researchers said, almost incredulously, $1 million in wage gap. Wow. It indicates that we still have severe racial wealth inequity in this country. And yet, we again see how the supporters of the twice impeached, four times indicted individual who was found by a jury to have sexually assaulted a woman, found by a judge to have committed massive business fraud, which led to about $500 million in fines, which he's appealing. But when you see supporters of this guy, um, you understand that many of them, this is what they want to keep in place. It's not necessarily, and he said it himself, it's not about him. It's not about me, he says. It's about you. And he's talking to all of these billionaires, in which he has, when he was in office, he made sure they paid no taxes, like he doesn't pay any taxes. While you and I struggle to make sure we pay, and on time too, our taxes. But this is why um, many of those folks, they could care less about 45, the man, but what they do care about is what he will do with the power that is provided through the presidency. And we've seen that. I mean, look, the investigation on the investigation arm of Congress found that back in January that Donald Trump, while president, sold U.S. interest to enemies. And so, thank you. And so, to increase his bottom line, his personal bottom line. It's like President Biden said at the White House Correspondents Association's dinner, this guy, um, he picks up so he starts hawking Bibles, reads the line where it says, "Thou shalt not covet other gods," and said, "Oh, this book is not for me." But this is part of, and a lot of things we bring on, let it be known, um, have been directly to continue to educate uh, listeners, viewers, and readers of the Black press of America. We feel like we have a duty to do that, to continue. We can't tell you and won't tell you what political affiliation you should or shouldn't have. We can't tell you what to do when it comes to stuff like that. But what we can do is arm you with information, which is what journalists and news organizations are supposed to do. Historically, used to do, and until this age of podcast and people, bloggers, I should say, and I don't really have a problem with the podcasters if they purport to be news. Just be news. Bring the information to the public. We have journalists. I always say this about us. People say, what are one of the things you like best about being a journalist?" I say, "You get paid to be nosy. You get paid to pry into other people's business." And with that, to borrow that corny line, it used to, the first 200 times you heard the line, it was cool. But with great power comes great responsibility. And so we have a great responsibility. When we walk through that gate at Pennsylvania Avenue, we walk into that briefing room, we walk into those hallowed halls that Kennedy and Nixon and Reagan and Carter and Clinton and Obama called home, we have an obligation not to be friends with Obama, not to be friends with Trump, not to be friends with Biden, but to be friends with the American public. In other words, to provide them with uh, factual information, whether or not the guy you like or the girl you like has done something good, bad, or indifferent. And it seems that, especially today, with all of the noise, and we did a program a couple of weeks ago in which Greer aptly titled White Noise. We have to get beyond the noise and bring you stuff that it used to be. Come on, the Power 96 is watching with a hangover on the boat with Tom Joyner. And it used to be that you turned on the news perhaps at 6 p.m. or 11 p.m. and you just simply got facts. He just told you the news. If you're from New York, you turn on WINS, 1010 wins, you give us 22 minutes, and we'll give you the world. And you heard news, just flat out news, not someone sitting there telling you something called alternative facts. And this is what we must, this is our charge. It's always been our charge. Now, do all of us carry it out? Of course not. But right here, and let it be known, we certainly make every effort to every single weekday morning. And you guys tell us, you let us know when we're off or if we're off. And that's the beauty of it. But this idea of this increasing wage gap, wealth gap, um, it should be disturbing on many levels. Should be very disturbing. He's bringing up Power 96, bringing up the epic failure of Shannon Sharp trying to be a journalist. He sounded like Herschel Walker when he interviewed Amanda Seales. It is must see TV. And so you have that, right? I mean, and it's no hating on Shannon because he has a platform, he has his place in this. But as long and this is the only type, if you want to call it criticism, then it's criticism. It's the only criticism of a Shannon Sharp type. Just remind folks, and I think he did this, so I can't really criticize him when he got some heat about Cat Williams. I'm not a journalist, he said, but most of them pretend or pretend to be journalists. I was so bothered by Mayor Adams of New York deciding to go on Drink Champs. There's nothing about Drink Champs that says journalism. There's nothing about Drink Champs that says that a journalist will sit there and hold you accountable. It's similar to President Biden, and I get this idea of President Biden going on the Howard Stern show. I don't have a problem with Howard Stern. I like Howard Stern. Don't have a problem with him. I don't dislike Howard Stern. I was on Howard Stern show before myself. Don't have a problem with him. But how Biden did that because Howard Stern has a major platform and he is on a campaign. But this idea of going to again, a individual to be interviewed that is a non-journalist, it flies in the face even of what the president himself talked about at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and that uh, he implored journalists to really do their jobs in a way that we're supposed to properly inform the American public. Howard Stern is entertainment. He's not typical media. He's not media that's gonna hold you accountable. I mean, he will say I mean, he's been outspoken about his disdain for the way that someone he once called a friend, Donald Trump, the way Donald Trump behaves, the way Donald Trump now thinks, but that's fine. He's not a trained journalist. He's an entertainer. And once again, President Biden, um, there is this entity called the Black Press of America. There is this entity that continues to grow called Let It Be Known. Black owned, black operated, black centered. I mean, it's like you'll go out of your way to do these non-media, and you've had 3.5 years of request from the Black Press of America. Now, some people will say, "Oh, I haven't seen them on even degree but right. So what's up with that? The Griot can speak for themselves. They have the resources. They got one of the richest men in the world, Byron Allen, behind them. The black press is always they've taken the black press probably invented the term shoestring budget. We don't we don't have Byron Allen resources. Austin is asking, has any other president been interviewed about Howard Stern while in office? That's a good question. I'm not sure. Not sure. Because I can't imagine like I don't think Obama sat down with him. I don't think Trump because of the strained relationship. I don't think Trump sat down with him, and I certainly don't think Obama ever sat down with him, or Bush, or even Clinton. Maybe Clinton. That might have been why he was running though. While he was running, so now that you mention it, Austin, I don't think any other president had. When I break it down, but see, these are the conversations. So we're talking about the wealth gap. These are conversations that we we would like to have with the president. We would like to listen. If the other guy gets in, Howard Stern, Mike V noted that Howard Stern and his only black friend Robin Quivers. Yeah, listen. Howard Stern seems to be as annoyed with uh, the overt racism as any others of his ilk. He does seem to be annoyed by it, and he's called Trump out on it. He has openly stated his absolutely abhorrence of it. So don't know if he has more than just Robin as a black friend. I don't even know if Robin is his friend because you work for somebody doesn't make them your friend. So Michelle Madison is asking, is this page able to accept advertisements? If so, would you want advertisers and sponsors? Well, Michelle, we have done, Greer and I have done what we've done without the benefit of an advertiser or a sponsor. And we've done this every single morning where I don't see anybody else doing it. Black owned, black press. And the one thing we will not do, and it's not about pride or anything else, it's about principle. It's about being able to continue to control, bringing you, Michelle, and the rest of you unvarnished truths and information you can use. And so, if bringing on an advertiser is bringing on a sponsor means that they get to dictate anything, then we will continue until someone comes to their senses. We will continue the way we are. We Without going into privileged details, we were approached a couple of times, but we were approached too by, um, let's just say someone in politics. Wasn't someone that we decided to get in bed with. As they say, all money isn't good money, or as they say, as they really say it, all money ain't good money. And so we continue. We will eventually get to where we desire to be, but we are enjoying being able to, without fear or favor, without restriction, be able to come to you every morning and bring you this information, like highlighting the continued disparities in the wage gap. Because those folks, they talk about emergency savings, and yes, we all know finance 101 is to try and have an emergency savings. How many? We just mentioned 44,000 is the average black family wealth. 44,000. That barely, if it, I mean, what type of lifestyle did that cover? You're talking about a family of four for the most part. What can you do? And it's not for, people kill me when they buy into, pulled up by the bootstrap type thing. Give it a rest. There are so many. There have been historically, and then we all know, so many obstacles for black and brown people to do just that. When majority, the overwhelming majority of white folks, to be quite simple, and I have nothing against white people who are not racist, because not all are racist. Many are not, but there's still enough who are. But many of the wealthy white folks that you see, the billionaires especially, it's off the backs. And this is why reparations is still a very important topic. It's off the backs of African Americans. It's free labor, slave labor that started their family wealth. And then it's the laws that they put in place. Reconstruction happened, Jim Crow. People forget that we had, as late as the 1960s, we had very little rights as people of color in this nation. Very little. And that's why it's important, and it's frustrating at the same time when you see black individuals who have quote unquote made it through either, you know, their ability to sing and dance, act, or otherwise, that they pretend that they didn't have the struggle, that their people who look like them don't still have the struggles. I hear so many times, whether it's an actor, a judge, Clarence Thomas, a senator, Tim Scott, how it, everything is, black people are overblowing this. You hear that silly, silly take. Need we even say Stephen A. Smith? You hear those silly takes, and they make themselves sound so big. So, yeah, and folks hang on to every word. But you go into anything that they're doing, you call their representative, their lawyers, their PR people, and the overwhelming majority of them are white. And the overwhelming majority of the mouthpieces for these folks, black folks, are white women. Overwhelming majority. And that goes to the rappers too, which still to this day surprises me. I don't know why it surprises me. I mean, why it still surprises me, but it surprises me because these are individuals who truly, many of them anyway, not all of them, but many of them who truly they were in the hood with us. They knew about redlining. They knew about the oppression. They experienced it themselves, and they have done nothing to reach back. Nothing. Many of them just go out and make babies, make a whole generation themselves. I mean, come on. I don't even want to go into it.
The people who decide which TV shows we see, 93% white. The people who decide which books we read, 90% white. People who decide which news is covered, 85% white. People who decide which music is produced, 95% white. School teachers, 82% white. Full-time college professors, 84% white. Owners of men's pro football teams, 97% white. Owners of men's pro basketball teams, 98% white. The
Mm,
players, 75% black.
mm,
Click the link in the bio to get the book.
mm. And there's a movie coming out. Speaking of what she just talked about, the pro basketball owns 98%. And Memphis Jokes. See Memphis Jokes is watching right now. And let me tell you, you got to watch on Wednesday nights the Memphis Joke Show. Now, Memphis is a as his name will tell you, he's from Memphis. He is a hip hop artist signed to Spit Slam Records, and this brother gets it. It's always got, and is one of the coolest dudes. Would never expect. And one day, Memphis is, and I've said this to Memphis. Memphis gonna win Grammys, but he's also gonna win those what those Golden Mike or Webby it was for his show one day. And he's gonna be one of them guys, black men who will have employees all around him. And I guarantee you, he don't need a DE. He won't need a DE and I person to tell him, we need to hire more black folks. We need to hire more women, uh, what, et cetera, et cetera. That is what we need. Y'all gotta check Memphis out on Wednesday nights. Check him out. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. It's the Memphis Joke Show. Check him out. But there's a movie coming out in June on, I believe, either Hulu or Netflix, one of the streamers, about Donald Sterling, the former owner of the Los Angeles Clippers. And one scene that the young lady there, when she mentioned her stats about owners, Donald Sterling says to Doc Rivers in the movie, and apparently this is a true story. It's a true story. It's based on a true story. Anyway, it's a true story. And Doc Rivers is still, he's coaching the Milwaukee Bucks right now. Doc says that he's confronted. He's getting to an argument with Sterling. Sterling says, "I'm your owner." He says, "You're not my owner." And we had um, former Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban on a couple of years ago, and Cuban says um, he had been trying to figure out a different term than owner because he recognized that the league is mostly black, and you have owners or those those who run the business. Let's say that are white, And the mentality owner, this white man standing next to this but LeBron James could probably buy a couple of NBA teams with his wealth, but he's standing next to this white man who says, and in his case, a white woman, because the Lakers are the franchise is in the hands of a white woman, Jeannie Buss. Uh, Imagine he referring to her as owner. It just isn't right. The optics, how it feels. He says, Mike V says, shareholder is more appropriate. So in that movie, Doc wants to make the distinction. Wants to make the distinction. Memphis says, "You made my morning." Memphis makes our Wednesdays come alive. So it's one hand washes the other. Um, in Power 96, some comments. A lot of today's black journalists are scared. They will sell their souls for a hot butter biscuit and a few dollars. That's and that's become not just uh, some black journalists who work for mainstream publications and outlets, but it's the white journalists as well. They go where the wind blows them, or maybe in some cases where the dollar takes them. Mike V says most black folks don't have $400 in their savings for an emergency. One medical emergency away from being unhoused. Isn't that the truth? And about these individuals that we talked about, again, Power 96, we've said it a lot. They climb the ladder and they take the ladder with them so nobody can come up. He also says the NBA is determined to make that league majority non-black. They go to Europe and give average white boys a chance. We have to be in the top 1% to get a chance in the NBA. And they have been doing a lot of that. They have been. They really have been. And the game, listen, I was watching the Lakers and Nuggets last night. I, I, I usually don't watch unless the Knicks are playing, and even then, I prefer, and I'll be at the Garden tonight. But I prefer it in person when I go watch the game. But Reggie Miller, the former Indiana player, Indiana Pacers player, there was a travel call on one of the Denver Nuggets, and Reggie Miller he said it out loud. He said, "Traveling in the NBA, you don't never see that call anymore." And the point of that is that how the game has changed so drastically, and not for the better. And yeah, David Youngblood said they'll sell their soul for a fish sandwich and a Coke. But you get the point. You definitely get the point. The average white home ownership rate has increased from about 65% in 1960 to 73% in 2022, while black home ownership has gone from 38% to 44% in that same period. So it's still lagging way, way behind. And it's something that, again, we have to find solutions that we can deal with that make sense. But here's the problem. As we've talked about the Poor People's Campaign earlier in this program, no one looking out for our interests. We have no one looking out for our interests. And that really is a problem. Has always been a problem. Well, the family of Ralph Yarl, a black teenager you might remember who was shot and injured last year when he knocked on the wrong door in Missouri. He filed a civil lawsuit against the shooter, Andrew Lester, and against the town there. The complaint um, names the Highland Acres Lakeside Heights Homeowners Association in the Kansas City neighborhood where the shooting took place and argues that their carelessness and negligence led Ralph to suffer and sustain permanent injuries Um, Lee Merritt, who does a lot of work with Ben Crump, is representing Ralph Yarl and his family. And he said, Ralph is an anomaly to me, honestly, because there is no hatred in his heart. There's no anger or bitterness. He has a strong sense of justice, and he wants us to move forward with pursuing justice for him. Of course, that 85-year-old man who shot him was charged with one count of felony assault in the first degree, and one count of armed criminal action, which is also a felony. He pleaded not guilty, and he's out on $200,000 bond. I mean, this kid, he shot him, and I don't know why he wasn't charged with attempted murder. I mean, he shot him in the head and in the arm. Remember, he went to pick up his brothers from a friend's house, and he just got the address wrong. And all he did was ring the bell. But see, this is the type of stuff, again, that you have somebody running for the highest office in the land who is okay with this, who pushes this. You have to really be armed with information, folks. His mother, Y'all's mother, says that he is slowly coming to terms with what happened. She says in the beginning, his way of dealing with it was minimizing, but trauma catches up with you. So the trauma has fallen away to catch up with him, is what she said. And Lee Merritt says that the civil suit, while the civil suit does not allege that it was because of uh, racism, but he added a young black boy living in Kansas City, Missouri, should be able to knock on the wrong door, should be able to move freely about his community without fear that he will be criminalized and that he will be violently assaulted. Um, Ralph is going to turn 18 years old next month. And according to his medical reports, he suffered traumatic brain injury, and recovery has been uh, really long, his mother said. It's still ongoing, as you can imagine. And as Mike V brought out, this man, Lester, his own grandchildren said that he was watching, of all things, Fox News, Tucker Carlson, before he answered that door and began firing. So he was charged up even more than what he might have already been charged up, watching that garbage. So Michelle, earlier you asked about sponsors and advertisers. Well, that's what they prefer to spend their money on. Um, it's interesting because yeah, Power 96. I do believe that he would not have shot a white kid. But what's interesting is that police departments across the country are now reporting an increase in their ranks for the first time since the pandemic and the 2020 killing of George Floyd. That incident started an exodus of officers, according to multiple police departments. More sworn officers were hired last year than in any of the previous 4 years, and fewer officers overall resigned or retired. Now, there were 214 law enforcement agencies who responded to the Police Executive Research Forum's survey on this matter. And that forum said that the Floyd's death, which spurred protests not just nationwide but around the world against police brutality, and it caused at that moment heightened scrutiny of law enforcement. That is what led many to leave, not simply because they was in opposition to what happened to George Floyd, but because of the heat that law enforcement was receiving and all the pledges about reforming departments. just just like corporate America's pledge to do better after George Floyd. All that stuff just went away. People made sure that they tickled the ears of individuals of color, businesses of color as well. They made sure to tickle those ears as well. And then that was it. That was it. Now we have all of this anti DE and I, anti affirmative action. And it's just a few short years since these pledges. See how quickly the tide turns? One thing about people, they will always resort to who they truly are when push, as they say, comes to shove. And that's what we're seeing. And you have once again leaders of major cities who happen to be black pushing the same narrative, going along, I should say, with the narrative. And that, my friends, is very unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Well, we'll leave you this morning with some. Today is April 30th, the last day of April. Time is flying. I'm going to leave you with some black facts that occurred on April 30th. The United Negro College Fund, for instance, uh, uh, incorporated on this date in 1944. And over the years, the fundraising activities of the fund would result in thousands of college educations for African Americans. And since 2004, Dr. Michael L. Lomax has served as president and CEO of the fund, the nation's largest private provider of scholarships and other educational support to African American students. And also on this date, April 30th, 1983, journalist and publisher Robert C. Maynard bought the Oakland Tribune newspaper from Gannett, becoming the first African American to gain a controlling interest in a major daily newspaper. The newspaper, which had previously been ranked one of the worst in the country, won a Pulitzer Prize in 1990 for its coverage of the Loma Prieta earthquake under Maynard's supervision. Ironically, though, it was economic issues resulting from that earthquake and the Oakland Hills firestorm of 1991 that forced Maynard to sell the paper in 1992. And on this date, in 1992, The Cosby Show, featuring Bill Cosby, aired its final episode after 8 seasons that changed television and changed the way folks looked at black folks on television forever. And also on this date, in 1994, the first all race elections took place, and then white ruled South Africa. The elections would bring an end to 300 years of white minority rule, which we all know, came to know as apartheid in the African nation, as well as bring about the election of Nelson Mandela as the country's first black and democratically elected president. Mandela had spent 27 years in prison unjustly, of course, because of his leadership of the African National Congress, which had led the struggle against apartheid. So, some black facts for April 30th to carry you into May. Everybody, thank you so much for watching Let It Be Known. Go to our YouTube page and subscribe. LIBK News. Leave some thoughts, share some thoughts. Tell us what you want to see on Let It Be Known. Tell us what you might feel we need. And we will see you again tomorrow. Thanks for watching.